Good evening, all. As anyone who's followed these reviews will realize, I am a fan of the work of Howard Phillips Lovecraft of Providence, Rhode Island. And Lovecraft's work has had a rather checkered history with TV and movie adaptations. Some of them are great, and a larger number of them are not. One that I have not reviewed previously because, quite frankly, I thought it was awful, is 1967's The Shuttered Room, which is a British movie. It was directed by David Greene, who was a television director mostly. Written by D.B. Ledroff and Nathaniel Tanchuk, based on The Shuttered Room by not Lovecraft, by August Derleth, who was one of Lovecraft's editors and also part of the quote-unquote Lovecraft Circle, which includes such luminaries as Robert Bloch and Clark Ashton Smith and Robert Howard and Frank Belknap Long and a great number of others. But Henry Kuttner, some really great science fiction and horror and fantasy writers. This adaptation stars Gig Young and Carol Lynley, also Oliver Reed and Flora Hobsen. It was shot in Kent, actually, England, which is supposed to be Dunwich, Massachusetts, and for some reason they made it an island because I guess they wanted to accentuate the idea of isolation and it being a place that was cut off from the outside world, which works to a certain degree in this movie. It is creepy, it's sort of bizarre, but unfortunately, basically all of the Lovecraftian elements were excised out of this by the writers and the producer. Interestingly, it was edited by Brian Smedley Ashton, who did a lot of Hammer movies. So his name will be familiar to you if you're familiar with Hammer Productions. It was directed by, it was produced by Seven Arts Productions, which also was a co-producer with a lot of the Hammer films, or Hammer/Seven Arts. This is Troy Schenck Productions and Seven Arts Productions, which are, other British producers. The story is fairly simple. It starts with a young girl who is played by Anita Anderson, and her parents, whose name is Whateley, which connects them to, of course, the Dunwich Horror. And her aunt, who is Aunt Agatha, played by Laura Robeson, and her mother is played by Judith Arthy, and her father is played by Rick Jones as Emma and Luther Whateley. And she is sleeping in her crib, and the father notes that a door upstairs had been left open. You don't really see the door or what's behind it. You just see this weird sort of portal, which is sort of spiky and strange looking. The door is red, and something comes down the stairs and scares the hell out of Anita Anderson. She's yelling, "Mama, Mama, no!" And Luther says, "You left that door open again." And she says, "No, I didn't." "Yes, you did." And then Aunt Agatha comes and escorts whatever it is away. And then the next thing we see is that the little girl is going away to boarding school, and we see her leave the island. Cut to, it's 10 years later. She and her husband, who's played by Gig Young, the girl's name is Susanna Whateley, played by is later played by the beautiful Carol Lynley. And they return to the island because her mother and father have died, and she has inherited their house and mill. It was a grain mill. And she wants to move back, even though there's a rumor that the mill is quote-unquote cursed, and that there's some sort of curse on the Whateleys, and the locals are very hostile. They're led by, there's a gang of kind of thugs that are led by Oliver Reed as her cousin Ethan, who is really creepy, and it starts hitting on her like the minute he sees her, and he's like really lecherous and awful. And everybody warns her, warns them not to go to the mill, that, it's haunted, and if they go in there, they'll never come out, and nobody named Whateley should ever go there, blah, blah, blah. And Gig Young basically blows him off, and they take he had a what was then a late model Ford Thunderbird. In that green, there was people who know Fords from the '60s will know what color green I mean. There was a color green that was on the Mustang, it was on the Mercury Cougar, and it was on the Ford Thunderbird. It was kind of a strange yellowish green with metallic undertones, and that's the color that this T-Bird is. And very stylish looking car, leather interior and everything. And people are making comments about, oh, you must be rich, etc., etc. And they go to this town, which is just like a little fishing village, and they're talking to this guy named Zebulon Whateley, who's played by William Devlin, but his dialogue was actually overdubbed by Donald Sutherland, who is not credited. I thought that was interesting. He has a kind of a strange assistant named Tate, and they are both welders, and they're working in their welding shop. And he says, Zebulon says, "You want to go up there?" He says, "Tate, come here." He says, "Take your mask off." He shows him the mask, and underneath his right eye is blind. And he has a terrible scar that runs all the way down his right cheek. And the guy says, "What happened to him?" He said, "Well, I went out to the island, and Dunwich Island, and I had no place to stay, and there's no motels, so I stayed at the mill for one night, and in the middle of the night, all hell descended upon me and tore away my eye." And he says, "If you were smart, you'd stay away from there, and especially keep your wife away from there. Nobody named Whateley should ever go there." And Gig Young is like, "Oh yeah, come on, that's just local legend nonsense." He pays a barge master played by Charles Lloyd Pack to take him, and he has a barge that can take the car over to the island, and they do that, and go over to the island, and they see the mill, and it's burnt out. They're thinking of fixing it up and using it as a quote-unquote summer house. Well, everybody's opposed to this, especially this creepy cousin played by Oliver Reed. Very well, I thought, as Ethan. He's really one of the better things in this. He's one of the really creepy elements. Though there's something that I didn't like, and I'll talk about that in a minute. As I said, there's really nothing very Lovecraftian about it, other than the fact that there's something hidden in a shuttered room above the mill. And we see things from its point of view, whatever it is. And we hear breathing, and the camera focuses as it's focusing down, as if something is looking down on Susanna and Mike as they approach the house, and the mill, I should say. And we also see at various points something else it seems to be looking at. Whoever comes near the house, this thing it's aware of them, whatever it is, and they don't tell you until the ending. But one of the things that happens is they encounter this gang that's led by Oliver Reed. This gang is basically yokels, what the British would call yabos, and these are played by Murray Evans, Clifford Diggins, and Peter Porteous, and they're actually rather creepy too. And there's also Ethan's erstwhile girlfriend, which makes you wonder why he lusts after Carol Lynley so much, because this girl I thought was actually quite a bit better looking. Actress named Judith Arthry, very beautiful, buxom blonde. But anyway, that is Ethan, has been promised the mill by his Aunt Agatha, who told him, "Don't worry, Susanna Whateley's never coming back." Well, she does come back, and now his inheritance, as it were, is threatened. So he starts making some kind of veiled threats towards them. Again, approaches them, and they run into this gang, and they're like harassing them, and won't let them through. And eventually, he has a physical confrontation with Ethan, has to basically punch him out, or he won't get out of his way. And then he does that, and the gang is kind of upset. And but they go to the house, and they're looking around, and all they see is like cobwebs and old toys, and Carol Lynley is kind of acting a little aloof, like, she remembers certain things about the house, but she doesn't remember a lot. And Mike wants to go into town and get some supplies, because they're going to stay there overnight at least. And he's waylaid by Ethan. Ethan tells them that Aunt Agatha wants to meet them. And then he also tells him that, you can't take the car. She lives up in this lighthouse and you can't get there, which is actually a lie. And as he's like helping them up this, cliffside and rather roughly manhandling Carol Lynley and tears her stockings and, puts his hands on her butt. It's being, lecherous. And then he helps Mike up the cliff as well, and they go and meet in this lighthouse. And she tells him the same thing, there's this curse on the Whateleys and you shouldn't have come here. And, it tells Susanna you should never have come back. And shows him the graves of her mother and father and says, they were both killed by lightning and their faces were horribly distorted and, warped. And you really, the same thing will happen to you if you stay in that house. And she has this is kind of an interesting thing. She has a pet osprey, which is a fishing eagle. And Mike asks her while she's feeding it. Mike asked her at one point, does that thing bite? She says, of course he bites. That's how he survives. She says, he's not domesticated in any way. He's wild, just as nature made him, and that's why I love him. She has a pair of hawking gloves, leather gloves that she uses to handle him. But he's basically a wild osprey that sort of is and sort of isn't her pet, which kind of brings a little bit of an element of witchcraft into this. Is she a witch? Isn't she a witch? We're not really sure. Ethan says she is, but we don't really see any direct evidence of that. Then they're going to stay in the mill anyway, despite this warning. They find out that there is a road that leads from the lighthouse back down to the mill, and they could have driven up, but Ethan was being, a jerk with them. And as I said, Carol Lynley kind of walks around the house. She's taking down some cobwebs and looking around some things. She hears kind of a chain rattling somewhere upstairs in the house and starts going towards an upstairs room, but something stops her and she doesn't go there. And again, we see something kind of from the point of view of whatever is up there. We don't know what it is yet. And Mike goes into town to get some supplies and is told when he comes back by this girl that Ethan is dating, Emma, that the gang is after her, that they're following Carol Lynley, which they did. She changed her clothing into a different, she wears these sort of suits. One of them's blue and one of them's white, kind of, fashionable looking for the time. And they're kind of coming after her. And the implication is that they want to sexually assault her, which is rather frightening for 1967. And that's where, I'm sorry, that didn't happen to her. This is where Mike confronts Oliver and punches him out and knocks him into the water and takes off. Interestingly enough, he doesn't really say anything defending. He doesn't say, like, you better leave my wife alone or anything like that. He just hits him, and, that's kind of it. Not really defending her very much at all, which I thought was kind of unusual considering they were supposed to be newlyweds. They go back, to the house, and a number of things happen. He is, I don't remember, Mike is, I don't remember, he goes into town for something, again, and now he's waylaid by another one of these, I think it was Peter Porteous, as one of these members of the gang, and says, hey man, can you give me a ride, and he says, yeah, sure. He says, where are you going? He says, I'm going where you're going, into town. And so he starts to, and then the rest of the gang shows up, and they have this beat up old pickup truck, and they block the road, and they like wrap him up with a fishing net with fishing weights tied to it, and beat him up, and they're like throw him in the road, and they're playing chicken with him, driving the car at him but not hitting him, and eventually he, despite the fact that they've tied him fairly well, he gets out of the rope and basically beats the crap out of all of them, and uses, like, apparently he's been trained in martial arts, or maybe he was in the army, they don't really tell you, but and then in the intervening period when he was being tortured by the gang, Emma went up into the house to, I guess, to warn Susanna what was going on, and stumbles into the shuttered room, and something horrible attacks her and slashes her face, and you hear growling and yelling and screaming. And Mike's car, as she mentioned, has a horn that sticks. His horn, once it starts, it won't go off unless he opens the hood and disconnects it. And the horn goes off. He and Susanna had just been having dinner, at the mill, and that's when Emma stumbles in, and this thing up in the attic, whatever it is that's chained up, attacks her and viciously savages her, tears her face to pieces, and strangles her to death, I believe. And you can't hear her screaming over the sound of the horn. And by the time she's dead, the horn has stopped. So they don't know anything's happened. There are a number of things, again, I'm not going to tell you the entire plot. A number of things happen. Again, there's some more confrontations with this creepy Oliver character, Ethan character, and he gets his comeuppance in a rather appropriate way. And finally, it's revealed by Aunt Agatha, who is played by Flora Hobsen, that she did a really good acting. Now, unfortunately, both Gig Young and Carol Lynley are very flat in this. They come across as like they're just reading lines, like they're not really. Neither of them really gets into character very much, which I thought had a detrimental effect on the story. You don't really believe that these are two real people. It's like they're just sleepwalking through their roles. But Flora Hobsen was very good as Aunt Agatha. She's really the only animated. She and Oliver Reed are the only animated actors in the whole thing, really. And tells them that finally, after she discovers that Oliver's dead, that he was killed by whatever this thing was in the attic, that what it is, it's Susanna Whateley's sister, who is mad and was kept up there because she made a promise to their parents. She invented the whole thing about the Whateley curse. There is no Whateley curse, but she promised their parents that she would take care of this mad sister who lived up in the attic and apparently had killed quite a number of other people. That's not the way the story, The Shuttered Room, ends at all. The Shuttered Room, the story by August Derleth, which is refers to as a posthumous collaboration with H.P. Lovecraft because he borrowed certain elements from the Dunwich Horror and also the Shadow over Innsmouth, ends with the discovery of what's in the Shuttered Room, and it's not someone's mad sister. It's something much more Lovecraftian. Again, I won't spoil that for anybody who hasn't read the story because it's quite good. I don't usually like a lot of the some of the other stories by the Lovecraft series, though I do like quite a number of them, especially the ones written by Robert Bloch and by Robert Howard were particularly good, I thought. August Derleth's stories were also good. They're a bit derivative, but anyway, getting back to the movie, some people think it's like a lost cult classic. I disagree. I don't think it's neither lost because you can find it. You can play it on YouTube for free, so it's not lost at all. And it's not a classic. It's really not a good Lovecraft adaptation. It's too mundane. They cast off all of the elements of the Dunwich Horror and the Cthulhu mythos and the elements of the deep ones from the Shadow over Innsmouth in favor of make it a more conventional horror story, which I think kind of ruined the whole thing. And I really can't recommend it highly. If you want to see it just for the fact that you want to include all of the 60s and 70s adaptations of Lovecraft, which include the really quite excellent version of the Dunwich Horror directed by Daniel Haller, who was a student of Roger Corman's and did the set decoration on the Haunted Palace, which is one I'd also recommend, starring the wonderful Vincent Price, which is a really fairly straightforward adaptation of The Case of Charles Dexter Ward, a Lovecraft's novel, and follows it pretty closely. Yeah, it deviates a bit, but not enough to be, a bad adaptation. It's actually a rather good adaptation and very creepy and very well done. Also, like I said, the Dunwich Horror, the version with Dean Stockwell and Sandra Dee and Ed Begley Sr., not Ed Begley Jr., is really quite good. And again, it doesn't deviate a whole lot from the story of the Dunwich Horror. They couldn't shoot certain things because they didn't have the special effects back then. But the special effects they did have were pretty darn good, I thought, for that time. It comes across very realistically as a Lovecraft story, but The Shuttered Room does not.